The winter of 1885 was the cruelest Pine Ridge, Montana had seen in decades. Snow fell without mercy, burying the land under thick white silence. The wind cut through trees and cabins alike, howling like something alive. Most people stayed indoors, clinging to warmth and prayer. But Emma Clark was not like most people. She pulled her worn wool coat tighter around her thin frame as she trudged through knee-deep snow near the edge of the woods. Her boots were soaked. Her fingers burned with cold. She had gone out to check her trap lines, knowing the risk, knowing winter did not forgive mistakes. Still, she went. She always did. That was when she saw it. At first, it looked like a fallen log, half buried beneath a snowdrift, dark, still, out of place. Emma squinted through the falling snow and took a cautious step closer. Her heart stuttered. It was a man. She dropped to her knees beside him, snow soaking through her skirt. His body was face down, twisted unnaturally, as if the land itself had rejected him. His coat was torn open, stiff with ice. Frost clung to his dark hair. His lips were blue. "Oh, God!" she whispered. Her hand shook as she reached for his neck, searching for a pulse. For one terrible moment, there was nothing. Then, faintly, barely there, she felt it. Alive. "Hold on," she breathed. "Please, just hold on." She did not know who he was. She did not know how he ended up miles from town in the middle of a blizzard. None of that mattered. If she left him here, he would be dead before nightfall. With a strength born of desperation, Emma hooked her arms beneath his shoulders and began dragging him through the snow. Every step burned. Her legs trembled. The wind fought her like an enemy. More than once, she slipped and nearly fell. Her cabin lay just beyond the tree line. She reached it barely conscious, kicking the door open with numb feet and dragging the frozen man inside. She collapsed beside him on the floor, chest heaving, then forced herself up again. "No," she muttered. "Not yet." She stoked the fire until flames roared. She stripped his frozen coat and boots away, her fingers aching as ice cracked from fabric. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to his body like a second skin. She wrapped him in every blanket she owned, then filled a basin with lukewarm water. Slowly, carefully, she began warming his hands, his arms, his face. His skin was cold as stone. "You're not dying here," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. "Not today." Hours passed. Emma never left his side. She fed the fire, changed the water, watched his chest rise and fall, afraid every breath would be the last. The storm screamed outside, rattling the cabin walls, but inside she held her ground. When dawn finally crept through the frost-covered window, something changed. His breathing steadied. Color returned to his cheeks. Emma sagged against the wall, tears burning her eyes. Only then did she allow herself to rest. She studied him in the firelight, really seeing him for the first time. He was young, about her age. Strong jaw, broad shoulders, hands rough with work. But his clothes, even ruined, were not ordinary. Fine wool, careful stitching, expensive. Who was he? No one ended up out there by accident. Someone had left him to die. The days that followed blurred together. Emma kept the cabin warm night and day. The stranger did not wake, but he did not die either. Each morning she checked his pulse. Each evening she cleaned his frost-bitten fingers and toes, whispering encouragement he could not hear. "You're stubborn," she murmured one morning. Most men would have given up by now. She found herself talking to him often, at first to fill the silence, later because she needed to. "I wasn't always alone," she told him one night, staring into the fire. "I had a family once. Fever took them 3 winters ago. Everyone but me." Her voice softened. "That's why I live out here." On the 5th day, everything changed. Emma was adjusting his blankets when she felt it, a slight pressure against her wrist. She froze. His fingers twitched. Her breath caught. She leaned closer, watching his face. His eyelids fluttered. "Can you hear me?" she whispered, taking his hand. "If you can, squeeze my hand." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he squeezed. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's it," she said softly. "Keep fighting." From that moment on, signs came more often. A twitch, a breath that caught. Emma stayed by his side through it all, refusing to let him slip away. On the 8th morning, she was stirring broth when she heard a sharp intake of breath behind her. She turned slowly, heart pounding. His chest rose and fell too fast now. His fingers curled into the blanket. His head shifted. "No," she whispered. "Easy." His eyes snapped open, blue-gray, confused, searching. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist.
"It's all right," Emma said quickly. "You're safe."
"You're in my cabin." His lips moved, but no sound came. She brought water to his mouth, helping him drink. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Where am I?" "Pine Ridge," she said. "I found you half frozen 8 days ago." His brow furrowed. 8 days? She nodded. He stared at the ceiling, then back at her, fear creeping into his eyes. "Who am I?" Emma's heart dropped. "You don't remember?" He shook his head slowly. "There's nothing," he said. "Just cold." "It's all right," she said gently, though fear curled in her chest. "It may come back." He studied her face as if trying to carve it into memory. "Emma," she said. "My name is Emma Clark." He repeated it softly. "You saved me." Before she could answer, his grip tightened. "Please," he said urgently, "don't tell anyone I'm alive." "Not yet." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with winter. What kind of man needed to stay dead? And what danger had she just pulled into her quiet life? Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls, carrying secrets buried deep beneath the snow. The days after the stranger woke passed slowly, like the careful turning of pages in a fragile book. Emma watched him closely, afraid that if she looked away too long, he might slip back into darkness. He slept often, his body still weak, his mind even weaker. When he was awake, he asked the same questions again and again. Where am I? How long was I unconscious? Why does my head hurt when I try to remember? Emma answered each time with patience, even when fear sat heavy in her chest. She did not tell him about the unease growing inside her, about the feeling that this man was not meant to survive. She began calling him Cole, a name she chose without thinking. It felt kinder than leaving him without one. Cole learned to sit up first, then to stand. Each small victory came with pain and frustration. His legs shook when he tried to walk. His hands trembled when he held a cup. "I hate this," he muttered one afternoon, collapsing back onto the bed after barely making it 3 steps. "I know," Emma said, kneeling beside him, "but you're alive. That counts for something." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if trying to understand not just her words, but her presence. "Why did you save me?" he asked quietly. "You didn't know who I was." Emma shrugged. "You were breathing." Something passed through his eyes at that, something deep and unsettled. Nights were the hardest. The wind clawed at the cabin, the fire burned low, and sometimes Cole would wake with a sharp gasp, his body rigid, his eyes wild. "Water," he whispered once. "Cold." I was falling. Emma would sit beside him until the shaking stopped, speaking softly, grounding him in the present. She never asked for details. She could see the fear carved too deeply into him. As his strength returned, so did fragments of memory. A voice shouting his name, the smell of leather and sweat, the sound of rushing water. "I was on a horse," he said one evening, staring into the fire. "I know that much." Emma's fingers tightened around her sewing. "Do you think you were attacked?" He hesitated. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel like an accident." The words settled between them like a shadow. One morning, as Emma cleaned his frostbitten fingers, Cole stiffened. "Wait," he said. "That hurts, but not the way it should." She looked up. "What do you mean?" "I can feel more," he said slowly, "like my body remembers pain better than my mind remembers anything else." That same day he stood without help for the first time. When he fell, Emma rushed forward, but he caught himself on the table, breathing hard. "I'm not done," he said through clenched teeth. Neither was fate. 2 weeks later, Emma rode into Pine Ridge for supplies, leaving Cole alone for the first time. He protested, but she insisted. "I'll be back before dark," she said. "Stay inside." He nodded, but unease flickered across his face. Emma moved quickly through town, keeping her head down. Pine Ridge had not changed. Same wooden storefronts, same tired faces, same quiet gossip hanging in the air. At the general store, voices hushed when she entered. "Did you hear?" one man whispered. "They finally declared him dead." "Buried him without a body," another replied. "Storm took him, they say." Emma froze. "Who?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. The shopkeeper looked at her, surprised. James Thornton, biggest ranch owner in the territory, vanished in the winter storm weeks back. Emma's heart began to pound. "Any family?" she asked. "A brother," the man said. "Daniel Thornton took over everything." Emma left with shaking hands. When she returned to the cabin, Cole was standing near the window, staring out as if something beyond the trees had called to him. "You're back," he said. "There's something I need to tell you," Emma replied. Before she could continue, his expression changed. His body went rigid. "I remember my name," he said. Her breath caught. "What is it, James?" he whispered. "James Thornton." The world seemed to tilt. Emma reached for the old newspaper she kept stacked on the shelf. Her hands shook as she unfolded one. There, sketched in rough lines, was his face. James Thornton missing, presumed dead. James stared at the paper, his jaw tightening. "My brother," he said slowly. "Daniel, he was there." Emma felt cold all over. "You think he tried to kill you?" James closed his eyes. "I know he did." The truth unraveled quickly after that. James remembered the saddle strap, the ridge, the fall, cold water swallowing him whole. "He wanted me gone," James said, his voice flat. "Everything was left to me. The ranch, the contracts, the land." Emma sank into a chair. "James, this is dangerous. If he knows you're alive." "He can't," James said. "Not yet." They rode into town together the next morning. James kept his hat low. Emma led him to Doc Hayes, the only man she trusted. The old doctor nearly dropped his glass when he saw James. "You're supposed to be dead," Doc Hayes whispered. "Not dead enough," James replied. The truth came out in pieces. Daniel's debts, his anger, the men he hired, the lie he told the town. "You stay hidden," the doctor warned. "If Daniel finds out, he'll finish what he started." But James was done hiding. With the sheriff's help, they gathered proof, witnesses, records. Whispers turned into testimony. When James finally rode up to the Thornton Ranch, the sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across land that once belonged to him. Daniel stepped onto the porch, his face draining of color. "You," he breathed. "Me," James replied. Daniel reached for his gun. He did not get far. The truth spilled out in anger and desperation. Greed laid bare. A brother's betrayal exposed. Daniel was arrested before nightfall. As the ranch hands watched in stunned silence, James stood still, as if unsure what to feel. Emma stepped beside him. "It's over!" James shook his head. "No, it's just begun." That night, back at the cabin, James sat quietly by the fire. "I don't know who I am without all that," he said. "Without the ranch, without the name." Emma sat beside him. "You're the man who fought his way back from death." He looked at her then, truly looked at her. "And you," he said softly, "are the woman who gave me a second life." Outside, the wind had finally stilled, but something new stirred between them, fragile and dangerous, waiting for its moment to change everything. The world did not change overnight after Daniel Thornton was arrested, but something deep beneath it shifted. Pine Ridge buzzed with quiet talk. People who once spoke James Thornton's name with envy or fear now spoke it with disbelief. A man buried without a body had walked back into his own life. James returned to the ranch, but it no longer felt like home. The wide fields and long fences looked the same, yet everything felt hollow. Every room carried the weight of betrayal. Every corner reminded him of how close he had come to dying alone in frozen water. Each evening, when the sun dipped low, he rode away from the ranch. He rode back to Emma. Her cabin remained small and plain, tucked against the trees, like it always had been. But now it felt alive, warm, safe. It was the only place James could breathe without feeling watched. Emma never asked him to stay away from the ranch. She never asked him to stay with her, either. She simply opened the door when he arrived and handed him a cup of coffee or stew, as if this new life had grown there naturally. One night, as they sat by the fire, James spoke the thought that had been weighing on him. "My brother wanted everything I had," he said quietly, "and I almost lost my life because of it. But out here, none of that mattered." Emma stared into the flames. Sometimes losing everything shows you what actually matters. James turned to her. "I don't want to go back to being that man." She met his eyes. "Then don't." The truth was simple and terrifying. James Thornton had power, land, and wealth waiting for him. But the man who had woken in Emma's cabin had been stripped of all that. And somehow, that man had been happier. Weeks passed. Daniel was held for trial. The ranch continued under James' name, but he let trusted hands manage it. He spent more time chopping wood with Emma than signing papers. And slowly something fragile grew between them. It showed in small ways. In the way James fixed the loose step on Emma's porch without being asked. In the way Emma mended his shirts and pretended it meant nothing. In the quiet glances that lingered too long. One evening, snow began to fall again. Light and gentle this time. Emma stood outside watching it drift down. "I found you in snow like this," she said softly. James stepped beside her. "You saved me." She shook her head. "I gave you warmth. You chose to live." He turned to her, his voice steady but low. "You gave me more than that. You gave me a place where I didn't have to be anything but myself." The words settled between them, heavy with truth. That night, James reached for her hand. She did not pull away. When the trial came, Pine Ridge gathered like it had never gathered before. Daniel Thornton stood before the law, stripped of power, his lies laid bare. Witness after witness spoke. The saddle strap, the hired men, the debts. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty. Daniel was taken away in chains, shouting until the doors closed behind him. The sound echoed, then faded. A chapter ended. James stood outside the courthouse afterward, the cold air sharp in his lungs. Emma stood beside him. "It's done," she said. He nodded. "And I don't feel what I thought I would." "What do you feel?" He thought for a moment. Free. Spring arrived slowly, pushing winter back inch by inch. Snow melted into streams. Green crept across the land. Pine Ridge breathed again. James made his choice quietly. He returned to the ranch one final time and stood on the porch where his brother had tried to destroy him. He looked out over the land and felt no pull. That evening, he rode to Emma's cabin with purpose. She was chopping wood when he arrived, her sleeves rolled up, her hair loose from its braid. "What's wrong?" she asked, seeing his expression. "Nothing," he said. "Everything." Inside the cabin, James set a small box on the table. Emma stared at it, confused. "I spent my life believing I needed to control everything," he said. "That strength meant taking. But when I lost my memory, when I had nothing, I learned something else." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. "I learned that real strength is choosing where you belong." Emma's breath caught. "Emma Clark," James said, his voice steady but full. "I don't know what the future holds. I only know that when I imagine it, you are there. Not because you saved me, but because you are my home." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm not asking you to leave your life," he continued. "I'm asking to share it, to build something honest, together." Emma did not answer with words. She stepped forward and placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat she had once fought to keep alive. "Yes," she whispered. The wedding took place in late spring beneath tall trees behind the ranch. The town came. People who once doubted Emma now looked at her with respect. They had all heard the story. James Thornton, the powerful rancher, married the quiet woman who saved him when he was nothing. Emma wore a simple dress. James wore no sign of wealth beyond a clean suit and calm eyes. When they spoke their vows, there was no grandeur, only truth. "I was lost," James said, "and you found me." "You were never lost," Emma replied. "You were just waiting." As the sun dipped low, they stood together hand in hand, listening to laughter and music carried on warm air. That evening they returned not to the grand house, but to the cabin. Emma paused at the door. "Are you sure?" James smiled. "This is where my life began again." Inside, the fire burned softly. Outside, the stars spread across the sky. Emma rested her head against James's chest, listening to the heart that once beat faint and frozen beneath her hands. "Funny," she said, "how one storm can destroy everything." James kissed her hair. "Or save it." And in that quiet cabin, where a stranger once lay dying, two lives came together, bound not by power or name, but by choice. The winter of 1885 had taken much from Pine Ridge, but it had also given something rare, a second chance.